we broke off last time as a listing agent right when you receive an offer. Because we thought that was a good, clean way to end that.
Got it.
Will it let you share? There you go.
Okay.
Okay. I will be back.
You recording?
I am. Yep.
All right.
All right.
Okay, guys. We will continue this. And again, they've all been recorded. So I still encourage you to ask questions and whatnot, obviously, but also probably be beneficial to go back and watch them whenever you need to for any explanation on any of these steps. And obviously, this isn't every single step as well. There's little things that happen in between. We're here to help navigate those as well. But we're trying to tackle the most important part. So whether you take this and you make your own checklist or whatever it is that you want to do to make sure that you don't miss anything is good. But also lean on your partners along the transaction, the mortgage people, the title people, to make sure that your communication is good and you know if there's anything that you need to be doing, and critical dates and timelines to make sure things are completed. So I'm sorry. Where did we stop off before? Presenting the offer or receiving an offer?
I'm not sure. I thought we were still on the buyer step by step. We didn't get to the listing. I know at one point she had this up by accident. I thought we were finishing up the buyer. Does anybody else?
Gene? I thought we jumped from buyer to a seller. Gene, do you recall? You're on mute. Sorry.
No, I don't recall. I was trying to go over my notes and I don't know. There's so many classes and so many notes. I don't think I was reading the right one.
Actually, no, I take notes every day. Let me go check real quick.
Okay.
I got a Word doc let me see. Because I know she had that up at one point, but let's see. Docs, and that was, so today is the 16th, so. Okay, yep, no, so yeah, so we're on the seller side, and it was receive offer and go over with client. I think that's the last note I took.
Okay. All right. So on the sell side, obviously when you've received an offer, you want to review it before firing it right off to your seller. And what I mean by that is, so remember we talked earlier about the fact that when you're representing a buyer, you're using our purchase agreement, right? Keller Williams Advantage purchase agreement and all of our documents. And the only really other things that you're bringing into your offer are the buyer's pre-approval letter, which you get from the lender, as well as the seller's disclosure and lead-based paint from that particular property that you're submitting an offer on. Purchase agreement wise, though, it's all of our documents. On the flip side, when you're representing a seller and you're receiving an offer, that offer is going to be written on that real estate company's purchase agreement. Okay. I say that because no two purchase agreements are the same. So you cannot just go to the price, the closing, just go to those fields in order to convey the offer. You really do need to read the offer. You have to read the language. And if you have questions on that prior to discussing with your seller, you need to communicate those with myself, with Sharon, with Pete, in order to make sure that you're advising your clients as best as possible. I have some clients that say, well, should I have an attorney to review this? The answer is, if you feel you should, yes, you should. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a legal advice, right? I trust that everyone that I have signed something reads it. That is not always the case. So if a client asks that, say, by all means, I'm not an attorney. This is typically boilerplate language, but I'm not giving you legal advice in terms of what you should sign or not sign. I'm giving you advice in terms of the price and terms of this offer. Okay. When I receive an offer, hopefully the agent's given me a heads up. They've called me and they've said, "Hey, Matt, my client's really interested, and we've talked about some of the things that are important to my seller." And then they've submitted it via email, and it's clean. It's one attachment, and they call or text to make sure that I've followed up and that I've received it. That's not always going to be the case. But hopefully they do that, because if you're receiving an email from somebody you've never received an email from and it has an attachment, it could very well go to your spam box. So it's really important to make sure that you follow up to make sure people have received it. I also, when someone calls me and says, yeah, we're sending over an offer, I'm very reluctant to notify my seller at that time to say, yeah, we're expecting an offer, because it's almost like once you put that, Murphy's Law says that, you're not going to get that offer, and then you have to backpedal and tell your seller why. So I always convey, yep, I have a conversation with that client or with that buyer's agent. They said they're pretty interested and they're going to be in touch. I don't tell them. I don't want to get them all, heated up before I actually have something. Once I do receive it, though, it's important not just call your client or forward the email, right? I like to get in a quiet space where I can review it, read it over, look through it, make sure all the documents are there, look at their pre-approval, maybe call their lender. I'm gonna make sure that I understand the whole offer, right? And then I'm going to notify my sellers. I'm going to say, hey, great news. We've received an offer. I'm reviewing it. Is there a time that that I can get it to you and we can discuss? This day and age, it's less common for you to present it in person, right? Sit down at the kitchen table and go over it. But that might be what your sellers want to do. Sometimes, they just review it via email. If you forward it, make sure you're not forwarding it with any other information that they shouldn't be seeing or reading. I don't like forwarding things from someone else, because then they have the buyer's agent's email address and such. I like downloading it, attaching it, and then sending it clean to them. I want to be that conduit between the parties. Not to say people do things, but you never know. I don't want to put myself in that position.
Matt.
Yeah.
Does the listing agent typically provide the lender's information for you to be able to call the lender, like you were saying?
The buyer's agent? The buyer's agent?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, the buyer's agent.
It should be on the pre-approval letter. It should be on the buyer's pre-approval letter, which then I can, and I'm not going to call the buyer's agent and ask for permission to call. If I feel comfortable, I'm just going to call. The contact information's on there. I'm going to say, hi, I'm the listing agent for 123 Main Street. I understand that you have done a pre-approval for a buyer who submitted an offer on my property. I'm calling to verify that, their pre-approval, and verify, have you reviewed all their pay stubs? Have you reviewed their tax returns? Have you fully underwritten them and pre-approved them, not just pre-qualified them, right? And
Do they always send one over?
I will never accept an offer on a property that I have listed without a buyer's pre-approval letter with it. And
Do they do that? Do you see those come through though?
Yes. As an agent, representing a buyer, don't ever submit an offer without a buyer's pre-approval letter.
No, of course not. I was wondering if in the industry people are trying to put in offers like that without any pre-approval.
Well, they can. They certainly do. I don't take it seriously, though, and I'm certainly not going to discuss with my seller, if that answers your question. I'm going to contact. That's why I review everything, and I'm looking through it, and I'm going to call that agent and go, hey, got your offer. There's no buyer. There's no pre-approval here, or there's no disclosures here, or there's no this, or there's no that. I'm not going to communicate with my seller yet that we have to review something that's incomplete. And that's why we talked about earlier, as a buyer's agent, it's imperative that you cross your T's, dot your I's to make sure that you are starting off on the right foot, making sure, everything's in line, right?
Right. Look coming across, making sure you're looking professional so the agent takes you seriously.
Yep. So I'm going to sit down and I'm going to discuss. I'm already basically just like I recommend doing with a buyer, where I write up in an email the bullet points of our offer when I'm submitting it. I like to basically do the same thing when I'm about to discuss the offer that we've received with my seller, meaning that I've picked out the pertinent points of a conversation. And that way, because again, it's mostly done over the phone. usually husband and wife maybe are on speaker, and you're here and you're go, okay, let's go through this offer. It's important for you to be able to say, these are the biggest points of the offer. These are some of my concerns. These are some of the things that, I have questions about or don't like or recommend we counter, whatever the case may be. But again, remember, it's not just about price. It's about the terms as well. So depending on what's important to your sellers, whether that's occupancy, closing time frame, whatever it is, make sure that you are prepared to go into that conversation, because your sellers, you owe it to your sellers to be able to quickly but also concisely go through it with them in order to for them to discuss, and then for us to be able to give a response to the buyer's agent. Sometimes, depending on your sellers, you're going to be able to either accept or have a counter right away. Sometimes they want to dwell on it or think about it or pray on it, whatever. And that's all fine. Just make sure that they have a clear understanding that time is of the essence, and you have a commitment from them as far as when you're going to get a response from them in order to put provide that counter. I always tell my sellers to counter an offer. Some sellers, I know that this isn't even worth countering. I think all offers are good offers, and all offers can be countered. It's not personal. I don't ever take things personal. It's business. And if the offer is really low, I'm going to probably pick up the phone and say to the buyer's agent, hey, first of all, I appreciate the offer. Thank you. I reviewed it. It looks like a relatively clean offer. Here's the thing. I'm concerned that my sellers are going to be a bit offended by the price because you're offering blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to just seek to understand, how did your buyers come up with that? How are you justifying this? I'm just having that conversation. Again, it's not personal, and I'm not going to get aggressive. I'm just going to say, hey, we're listed at 400. You've offered 350. We've been on the market for 1 week. Help me understand. They're going to maybe say, well, they don't think it's worth that. Okay, well, tell me more about that. Why not? This. Maybe they say, well, we noticed it's been on the market for a while. Maybe my buyers just kind of wanted to see it. Maybe your sellers are desperate. Okay, fair. They're going to give you a litany of maybe responses, all of which are okay, and I'm not going to argue. I am going to represent my client, though, and I'm going to try to determine what the tolerance is that those buyers may or may not have. Some agents are going to sing and they're going to tell you everything. Some, for instance, they might say, yeah, I know it's low, Matt. They just wanted to, they just wanted to kind of lowball. I'm fully expecting a counter. So, get us a counter, and I think we could put something together. Right. That's working together to figure out something. Right. Because I think a true negotiation is where both parties feel like they've won. Right. I don't really care if it's not a pissing contest. So if your clients want to write up something low, great. My sellers don't have to accept it, but they should counter it, right? You should always encourage your sellers to counter it. And again, you talk about this ahead of time so that they're not offended when it actually happens. Make sense? So assuming that my sellers have some sort of counter, right? I'm going to communicate that to the agent. I can put that in writing. I can mark up the purchase agreement, or I can simply give them a counter in writing. What that does is protects my seller from not being obligated if another offer comes along, right? If I put something in writing and I counter it, then it's in that buyer's hands in order to accept or to counter back. But if I just sell it verbally and another offer comes right in, I can go and accept that, and I'm not under contract with the first people. Okay. So that's why when you're representing a buyer, I think it's important to get stuff in writing as soon as possible. On the seller, it can be a little bit different, if that makes sense. But at the same time, I'm also one that talk is cheap. So if something's actually in writing, it's considered a little bit more, taken seriously. Right. Just like if I'm on the list side and a buyer's agent calls me and is like, well, my buyers want to offer 400. Cool. Put it in writing. I don't care what they're thinking about. I'm not going to present that to my buyer or my seller rather. I give it to me in writing, right? Just put something in writing, because if it's not in writing, it's not real. And if they're not even willing to do that, they're not even a real buyer. So let's say we have the back and forth, we get it under contract. Great. At that point, the buyer's agent is doing a whole bunch of work. And as the seller, we are waiting for them to schedule the inspection. We are waiting for them to schedule the appraisal. We are waiting for them to apply for their mortgage. We're kind of in this holding pattern, right? They're going to submit the request for the inspection, hopefully as soon as possible, typically via showing time. So your sellers are going to get the notification that a request has come through for the inspection. Set that proper expectations with your seller. It's going to be at least a couple hours. They need to be out of the house, remove all pets, just like a showing. They need to be gone. I'm not going to be there. The buyer, the buyer's agent, the inspector. After that inspection, and I also set the expectation, even on a great house, that they're going to find some things, right? Inspector is going to find some things. Doesn't mean we have to fix anything or give them any money, but they're going to find some things. And again, don't be offended. Depending on how they respond after the inspection, it's another negotiation. Again, your sellers don't have to do anything. I always suggest trying to come to an agreement. Now, if your sellers really hold fast and say they're not going to do anything, and those buyers do decide to walk, you've got to go back on the market. And agents are going to see that. They're going to probably say, all right, it went pending, went back on the market after 3 days, probably because of inspection results. And I'll tell you what, if a buyer found something at an inspection and they back out, the next buyer that comes along is going to find the same thing. So I always think, depending on the range of what the issues are, come to some sort of conclusion. Don't just set the expectations with your seller that no house is perfect and they could take impeccable care of it, but the inspector's job is to find things that they weren't really aware of, and there's nothing wrong with that. In the grand scheme of things, a few $100 or even $1,000 is pennies in comparison to the time it takes to go back on the market and potentially getting less money in the long run. Once you're through inspection, you're going to be waiting for the appraisal. Appraisal, again, same thing. Appraiser is going to reach out to the listing agent or submit it via showing time, a request to come through. This is a very quick thing. I don't necessarily need them to make sure the house looks impeccable and leave with all pets and kids. It is great to be accommodating, right? We don't want them coming into disarray, but an appraiser's coming in real quick. They're going to already done their report, most of their report. They're coming in to validate things. They're taking photos. They're going on the outside taking photos, and they're out. It's not as intrusive as an inspection goes. If I'm the listing agent, I like to be there for the appraisal. Okay. So when I see an appraisal request come through, or I receive a phone call from an appraiser, I want to be there at the property for that appraiser. Now, some appraisers are more open to your contributions. Some don't even care that you're there. But the point of me being there, especially if I think that there's certain comparables that this appraiser needs to have, I'm presenting them in a very respectful manner where I'm not undermining them doing their job. So what I mean by that is, hey, thank you so much for meeting here. This is a great house. We sold it. We went under contract relatively quickly. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this area, but there's a few comparables I wanted to make sure that you had. Have them print them out, that you give them to them. You're not telling them how to do their job, and you're being, again, very respectful. You're on the same team. All you're looking for, even though that appraiser has been hired by the mortgage company for the buyer, you want them to appraise the property for as much as possible. So if there's specific things about the home or comparables that you want to make sure that they have to justify the price, then is the time to do that. Make sense? Okay. Again, it's going to be real quick. So appraisers are going to come out. Okay. Yep. They're probably, some of them are very, they're not going to give you any sort of feedback. They're just going to take what you have, maybe give you a card. Some are going to be chatty. You never know what you're going to get. Kill them with kindness and move on. And then you wait for the results of the appraisal. Mortgage company is going to notify the buyer, or the list buyer's agent. They're not going to notify you, so you need to find out from them. So usually I'm adamantly following up, especially if I'm nervous that it's teetering a little bit. If the appraisal comes back and it's at value or higher, they're just going to say it's all good. Great, wonderful, let's move on. If it's low, how low, right? And at that point, the buyer typically has the opportunity to back out. But at that point, they're already in for an inspection. They're already in there for the cost of the appraisal. So they're probably in close to $1,000. They want to make it work. Doesn't mean that they have to come up with the difference, nor does it mean your seller has to come down. But if you had a purchase price of $400,000, or contract price, I should say, and it appraises at $390,000, the mortgage company is not going to allow lending up to $400,000. So if you kept the deal together at $400,000, the buyer's going to have to come up with that difference of $10,000, unless you kind of meet in the middle, either through a reduction on the sell side, buyer coming up a little bit, but it's a renegotiation at that point. We're not seeing a lot of low appraisals, which is good. You do typically see them in an accelerating market, because basically each sale is creating a new baseline. So not to say they don't happen, especially if you sell a property that's unique, or it's hard to find comparables, you should anticipate this potentially happening. If you are selling a home in a neighborhood where there's tons of houses like that selling all over, it's usually not an issue to find comps, if that makes sense. I always tell clients, we have to sell your property 3 times. 1, we have to find a buyer that's willing to purchase it. Number 2, an inspector has to pass inspection, which isn't really selling it, but it is. And number 3, the bank has to justify the price through the appraisal. So regardless, if you have a price at $500,000 and you've got somebody that comes in, unless they're paying cash, the bank has to justify that it's worth $500,000. Okay. Fast forward, got past the appraisal, you're waiting on that clear to close, right? That the bank has said, we've reviewed everything, we're good to be able to issue this loan, and you're going to work on scheduling that closing with everyone. Now, if the sellers are giving possession at closing, meaning the buyers get the keys right away and they get to move in, they're going to want to do the walkthrough prior to closing, sometimes the night before, sometimes the morning of. But your sellers should plan on being completely out and cleaning the home. The purchase agreements typically have language such as broom clean. So the idea of cleanliness is in the eyes of the beholder. But do your sellers have to have it professionally cleaned? No, they do not. Like the carpet's shampooed and this and that. No, they don't. I set the expectations, especially as you get to know your sellers, the type of home that they keep, to make sure that they keep it that way, right? All the items have to be removed from the home that aren't affixed. You guys remember the word chattel from licensing classes? Basically, think about this: if the house could be turned upside down and shaken, everything that falls off goes with the home. So if you have a piece of art on the wall, or if you have a shelf, that leaves, right? But if it's a light fixture, it needs to stay. If it's a TV mount, it needs to stay. If it's a built-in like closet organizer, it needs to stay. If it's, let's say, window treatments, this is a sticking point, and everything should be in the purchase agreement, but sometimes you need to coach your people on what is included and what's not included. Our purchase agreement, you'll note when we're representing a buyer, specifically says rods, drapery rods, blinds, shutters. Those things are affixed to the property, right? A rod is bolted in, let's say. Now, the drapes hanging from that rod are not. So unless otherwise specified in the purchase agreement, a seller could take the drapes. Does that make sense? But they have to keep the rod hanging, okay? Unless it's otherwise specified in the purchase agreement, okay? So when your sellers are preparing and moving out and getting all of their stuff out, make sure that they're not doing things like swapping out light fixtures, or, I mean, there's a lot of stories. People, they do these things, swapping out even appliances oh, it just says fridge. We got a new fridge, so we swapped it out, and we're taking the sweet one with us. You're going to have an issue at the final walkthrough when the buyers come through and look around, and the stuff is different than what it was when they were putting the offer together on it.
Hey, Matt, I got
Yeah.
a quick funny one. My buddy that lives in our subdivision over here, he moved like 10 houses down just to move to a bigger model. I think it was the grand version of his house. So he just moved down the street because he liked the subdivision. And the lady's a designer, and we're friends. We actually knew the lady. She moved out, and they had the whole blind situation. Like they didn't realize she was taking the drapes and stuff. But she actually went in the laundry room and took the handles, like the knobs, off the cabinets and replaced them with cheap knobs. And I think they were like it was the laundry room, so I think it was like shirts, like the shirts and pants knobs. You ever seen those shirts and pants knobs?
Yeah,
She took the shirt and pant knobs and replaced them. So yeah, like you said, it's every little thing. That I don't think she was allowed to do, but they actually did it without real estate agents. They drew up their own contract. So
yeah, at the end of the day, it's and this is why Pete's forms are as important and what you talk about in that class. At the end of the day, it's what's in writing, right? So if there's any ambiguity, it needs to be in writing. Other things that typically pop up. So like plastic shelving, those freestanding shelving in the garage or the basement, those don't stay with the property. But if someone has, the organizer board with the little hooks and stuff in it, that would stay. Now you can make an argument that the hooks themselves don't stay, right? But it's important, again, just to have those conversations. So when you're walking with your seller, you can ask, well, what are your expectations with that? Well, I'm removing that. Okay. Well, let's put this in the purchase agreement. Let's make sure we put this as an exclusion in the listing, right? Let's make sure that there's no question. I had a seller that had a Jeep Wrangler, and they had one of those setups where, the hooks come from the ceiling to pick up the roof, right, to drive out of it. I was very detailed in terms of what was not staying with the property and to make sure that there was no miscommunications or missed expectations. Same with like in my garage, I've got those metal hanging racks, right? Those are bolted in. Those should stay if I sold the property unless specifically excluded into a listing agreement. Okay. Another sticking point, people say, well, don't you have to then fill the holes? If you remove those things, fill the holes and repaint. Unless the purchase agreement states so, no, you don't. Okay. And that, again, it goes back to buyer's expectations. So when your buyers go through, they're not feeling disappointed and then going right to a closing feeling like they're getting screwed. Does that make sense? Now, if you're selling the property and the buyers don't get possession at closing, they're probably going to still want to do a walkthrough prior to closing, but your seller's stuff's still going to be there, and they're going to do another one when they take possession of it at a key exchange. Same thing. They're going to go through and they're going to say after they've gone through the property that it was left in the condition it should be, everything that was supposed to stay stays, and then they sign that agreement. That's why if I'm representing a buyer and there's occupancy, I want to make sure that there's money held in escrow, not just for the occupancy charge itself, but also for any damages. Okay. Meaning that the title company doesn't give the seller all of their proceeds at closing. They hold back some of that money in escrow and release it to the buyer or the seller when the keys are actually exchanged later on. It's like a security deposit. Does that make sense?
Do they hold any in that same situation for just a regular closing? I mean, what if it's not left in the condition it's supposed to after close?
Well, that's why your buyers should do a walkthrough right prior to closing. So when the condition that they see it at their final walkthrough is the same as it is when they sign.
And they don't hold anything in case it's not, even if it's the next day, like after they actually move and they take a furniture out and it falls into the wall and puts a hole in the wall or something when the removers come in.
Again, if your buyers are taking possession of it at closing, getting the keys, their walkthrough prior to that, it should be vacant. No furniture should be there.
Okay.
Makes sense? The seller should be gone. If your buyers go to a property and they're supposed to get possession of it right away and your sellers are not out of it, I would not advise them to go to sign, right?
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying they might not be gone yet when you do that final walkthrough.
I'd push closing. If they're supposed
Gotcha.
to get the keys right away, I would
Okay.
not until I saw it the condition that it should be in, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Perfect.
not going to be okay.
Okay.
Um okay, so you've sold the property, you go to closing. Your seller's documents are going to be a lot more simple than the buyers, especially a buyer's getting a mortgage, meaning that the sellers have less to sign, right? Um, let me back up a little bit though. After you've gone under contract prior to closing, your sellers are going to need to sign a payoff authorization form. It's a mortgage payoff authorization form. And this gives the title company permission to contact their mortgage lender to get the dollar amount that's the payoff, okay, of what they owe on the home. So the title company is going to pull title and they're going to see, oh, there's a loan, open loan from PNC Bank. Okay, we're going to need proof of this balance, Mr. Seller. Okay, great. Sign this. We're going to contact PNC Bank and we're going to get that dollar amount from them. Some sellers say, well, I can just give them the payoff. That's not how it works. The title company needs to do it because the title company doesn't just use what's on your last statement for your balance. They actually say, as of, if we close on this date, what is that calculation, right? For because there's prorations in it. And then they're also going to then, at the closing, send that dollar amount to be paid off to PNC Bank, right? So you might have to help them get that signed, which is called, again, a mortgage payoff authorization form. The title company is also going to reach out to the homeowners association, if there is one. They're going to make sure that your sellers are up to date on their dues to see if there's any past due balances. They're also going to be searching for any property taxes that are owed or any liens against the property, right? Anybody that's owed money and that's secured against the property, because everything has to be paid off at closing before the sellers get their proceeds. Okay. Most of the time it's pretty clear. It's fine. Sometimes you'll have things pop up. Sometimes it's an old loan that the title company pulls up that the sellers paid off years ago that you're going to have to hunt down documentation for. So it can be hairy sometimes. And that's why, again, you just want to make sure that you're going in a timeline after that goes under contract. You're ordering title with the title company and they're moving forward through any issues ahead of time. So you have time to work through it. You should never be waiting for a transaction to close because on the sell side, you're working through title issues. So at the closing or prior to closing, the title company is going to be able to send your seller a breakdown of all the debits and credits, just like on the buy side. But in this regard, it's going to have purchase price of X amount of dollars and all of the fees that the seller is going to be paying, plus their mortgage payoff, commissions, and it's basically going to give you a dollar amount that they're going to get at closing in the form of a certified check or a wire that the title company will send to their bank account if they wish. It's important to note that the sellers are basically paying the bulk of this fees and commissions associated with the transaction. Sure, the buyers have closing costs and stuff for their mortgage, and they do have title insurance for the amount that they're financing, but the bulk of the closing falls on the seller. And there are the commissions. Obviously, they're paying for both commissions. They're paying for transfer tax, which is a tax in the state of Michigan for relaying one property to another. There's a tax on that. There's also the seller's title insurance, which is the equivalent to the total dollar amount of the sale, not the buyer's amount that they're financing. There's also some title fees, right, for the title company to process and close the transaction. So all in all, these can add up to about 7.5%. And it's important as the listing agent that you set the proper expectations of what the seller is going to pay. What do I mean by that? Matt, didn't they sign a listing agreement that says there's what commissions they're paying? Yes, they did, right? But I always like to have what I'm drawing a blank.
A net sheet?
A seller's net sheet. You got it. Thanks, Justin. A seller's net sheet is going to basically itemize the seller's costs, fees, and payoffs to give them a dollar amount of what they're going to net from the sale. And I always do this at the time that we're accepting an offer. Okay. So what I mean by that is when I'm having a seller sign an offer that we're accepting, I'm also drawing up and including a seller's net sheet so that they are acknowledging that I've gone over the different places their money is going to go and what they're going to net from that sale. I find that it makes it a heck of a lot easier to tackle those questions ahead of time. It gives you an immense amount of leverage if later on they say, well, I didn't know this, so you didn't tell me that. It's just, again, very clear to say there's more fees, there's more things than just the commission, right? Again, that's in writing. The other things to sell a property that I don't control, right? If you sell a property in the state of Michigan, you've got to pay these things. They're not part of our listing agreement, so I just want to make sure that there's no question that I've explained to them and that they've acknowledged that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I have a question on that. Fadi was saying that, on his, like when he did the listing presentation
Mhm.
at the home, he would bring that net sheet with him based on what he was recommending to list their house for. Do you have an opinion on doing it? Obviously, you do it when you do it. Do you think there's a difference doing it in the beginning when you're trying to sign them, showing them that you know all these numbers and they've maybe looking more professional at that time, or not
Yeah.
doing that and waiting?
Yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with communicating ahead of time. Just, again, setting the proper expectations. But I don't have them sign it until I actually have like a dollar amount, right, of what we're going under contract at. But yeah, it's absolutely a great time to talk about the expenses related to selling us a home, because it's not just the commissions, right? There's other things involved, and the seller's net sheet's going to give you that scenario. I use the one with Legacy Title. So Legacy Title allows you to input the sales price, input the commission amounts, input the seller's mortgage payoff, have property taxes been paid already, yes or no, and it spits out a dollar amount. And it's just a one pager. I PDF it and I include that with the offer that when they sign, that they acknowledge. Is it exactly to the dollar? No, but it's very, very close.
Is that on Doc? No, that wouldn't be on DocuSign. We just asked them for that PDF.
Yeah, I have a username and password with Legacy Title.
Okay.
That it's free. That allows me to draw those up, and I can actually save them too, in the portal or whatever. So, Lindsay McKay from Legacy can shoot you a link. It's not. I want to say it's not really an app. It's like I think that it's like a tile that links you to a website. So it's kind of like an app, I guess you could say, but I just do it the desktop version. So you can see in my thing right here, that one's Legacy Title. So when you click on it, it just takes you to Title Capture app. And that tells you, you just have your username and password, and then all your saved ones in there. And you can actually do it for a seller's net sheet and for a buyer's estimating of closing costs too. So if you've done that properly, right, and you get the final statement from the title company that says, okay, here are all your fees and everything, that number should be very close to what you've already set expectation wise, right? And that's the amount that the sellers are going to get at closing. They're going to get a cashier's check, or if they prefer it to be wired, they're going to have to pay a small fee, and the title company will wire it. They just need to provide their bank account information, accounting number, a bank name, accounting routing number. So it depends on your sellers and what they prefer. Again, the buyers are going to do a walkthrough prior to closing. Utilities, I tell sellers, don't ever shut them off. Just call and make sure that they're transferred out of their name. Hopefully the buyers are doing the same. The water read. So water, assuming it's not well water, right? City water, the water meter water bills don't go get assigned to a. If I live in if I rent a property, right, and I rack up a big water bill and then I move, that water bill doesn't follow me. It stays with the property. So therefore, the water's typically read quarterly. So what a final water read is essentially is the city, township, whatever municipality reading that water amount at the day of closing or around there in order to prorate that final bill for the seller's responsibility and the buyer's responsibility. That water read should be the day of closing or the day of possession if the sellers aren't giving the keys right away. Same with utilities. Utilities should stay in the seller's name if they have occupancy in the home. However, the date of closing is essentially the new owners. The buyers own the home that day. So either they're taking immediate occupancy of it or they're becoming essentially landlords. Okay. So when you have a closing happen, even if the sellers aren't moving out right away, commissions still get paid, assuming the title company has received all the funds. Commissions still get paid, seller still gets their money. They just at that point basically become a tenant. Okay. If you have a sign in the yard, make sure that's removed. I'm not super in a hurry to remove the sign, quite honestly. Some people want it gone right away. For me, I like going to put a sold on it, right? I think that gives me some additional marketing, so I'm not in a super hurry to remove it, but everyone's a little different. Make sure your lockbox is gone, removed from it. Sometimes if your buyers are taking possession of it right away and they're doing their final walkthrough, you can ask the buyer's agent to bring your lockbox with them to give to you at closing so you don't have to make a special trip back out there. Something that you can do, but it's up to you. At closing, again, your sellers are going to have a lot less docs than the buyers assign. And they're going to get their funds and everything's going to be great. Okay.
Matt,
Yes.
sorry, lots of questions today.
It's good.
So if on the occupancy, who would be covering the utilities during that occupancy period? Is that factored into the per day cost or?
No, it's not. Whoever's living in the property. So if the buyers are getting possession at closing, the utilities gets transferred at closing. If the sellers are staying in the home beyond closing, they have occupancy, they're responsible for the utilities through that period of time.
Okay. And then the second, another last question I have is, so on the sign, obviously just communication, ask your buyer if they're okay with you leaving, or asking the agent or the seller if you're okay leaving it for 7 days after, or?
I'm on the, I think if you do that, they're going to say, no, we want it gone.
Right.
I'm very above board on most things, but on something like that, it's kind of like, ask for forgiveness later kind of thing.
Right, just tell them, hey, I'll have the sign removed the next couple days.
Yeah. Just say, hey, I've ordered the sign removal.
Okay.
On that note though, there's some mixed thoughts. If you are a listing agent and you've got a sign out there, right? Some people say, well, I want a sold sign put on it. Well, here are my thoughts on that. On one end of the spectrum, you put a sold sign out there, all the neighbors, everyone sees that and it validates, okay, this guy can get houses sold. On the flip side though, if I'm a buyer and I'm driving through a neighborhood and I see a for sale sign and I'm interested in that neighborhood, I'm going to call on that. But if I see a sold rider on top of it, I'm going to be like, that one's sold, right? So from a lead generation standpoint, I don't like as a listing agent to put pending or sold on it until it actually is. Does that make sense? Till it closes, I should say, even if it's under contract, because I still want to get those buyer leads. Does that make sense? So, there's no right or wrong, but it's up to you. There's nothing wrong with putting the sold rider on top of it at the day you close and keeping that out there for a little bit until it gets removed, so whatever the case may be. And then after the sale, making sure your database is updated, maybe doing a just sold postcard or a just sold, Facebook ad or mail or whatever, just to validate, hey, I sold this property. And the goal is to get more listings, right? Because a coach told me once, listings have babies. You know, you list the property and you sell it. You know, people say, well, that guy's down the street sold that house. Maybe should call him, right? And you can get a lot of business off of it because business begets business, and you obviously have proof of sale. So when you're going after listings, just keep that in mind. You know, this is an area that I want to do business in, so I want a listing there, and I'm going to take that listing and I'm going to leverage that listing to try to get more listings in that area. Make sense? Okay, so that wraps up sellers. And we kind of skipped, well, we went through the process of both, but we're going to do open houses now. Okay. So, open houses are something that some people, have mixed feelings about. What I mean by that is, in this day and age, people have lots of information right at their fingertips. I'm talking about in normal world, not pandemic world. But what I mean by that is an open house is a really candidly an opportunity for, you know, an agent to get more business off of that by interacting with buyers and with sellers as a reason to communicate with them. And, you know, if I list a property in a neighborhood that's desired, you know, there's probably going to be buyers with agents that are going to request and want to see it, or call me directly if they don't have an agent to want to see it. Open houses, I tend to I think they're definitely worth doing, but they're typically going to get the looky-loos or the not serious people, or they're going to get people like the neighbors or people that are early in the process that haven't engaged with an agent. But the reason a lot of agents love doing them is because they have the opportunity to meet new people, to generate. So it's not necessarily about selling that house. It's about being the ability to get in front of people that are looking to buy or sell in the area that they want to be in, or to sell houses in. Okay. So there's this 7th level open house flyer in there. And it's basically all the steps to maximizing the open house. So how it would work in the past is that the sellers would say, yeah, we're good with an open house on Saturday. And you would just go out and you'd put out balloons and signs and you'd hope people come through. The beautiful thing now is that you can advertise this all week long, right up until the open house, right? As a lead generation and as an event. So what I mean by that is you can put the open house on the MLS, which syndicates to Realtor.com, Zillow, all these different sites. You can post an ad on Facebook, such as open house. You can create an event on your business page. You can boost the heck out of that. You can use a lead generation form. You can you can door knock, you can door knock the neighbors, right? To say, hey, I've just listed a property in your neighborhood. I'm holding it open on Saturday from 11 to 12, 11 to 1. I'd love it if you stop by. All these neighbors are super nosy and want to know what their neighbors' houses look like. And, we script such as, we know that people love to pick their neighbors. So do you have anybody that that would love to be in this neighborhood? I mean, these are the type of people that are going to promote that. Conversely, maybe they hate their neighborhood and they're considering selling, and you've just met them and validated the fact that you can sell houses. And now they're thinking about, man, maybe I'm going to have that guy see what my house is worth. Right. So these are all reasons to host an open house. But you can't just show up. You need to utilize all of the things we have at our disposal. And what we talk about in coaching is that if you have, let's say on Monday, right, you have a property that you already plan on holding open on a Saturday or Sunday, you can utilize that property to do all of your lead generation that week up until the open house. So the open house itself is just the culmination of everything that you've done all week. What do I mean by that? Well, it means making sure that the open house is online, and then leading up to that, door knocking, running a Facebook ad, cold calling, circle prospecting, doing just listed, whatever it is that you're going to do all week, right? as a means to generate business. So at that open house, whether people show up or don't show up, you've had reasons to talk to people up until then. Does that make sense? Do I got everyone's on the attention with that? If you simply just say, oh, I'm just going to be that agent that just holds an open house and I'm going to show up with a couple signs, I'll tell you what, it's not going to be worth your time. You may or may not have people at your disposal that whole week leading up to it that you can use to maximize business. There are agents that just do open houses and do a ton of business, and it's because they utilize that property. So if you don't have any listings, right, you're new to the business, there are tons of listings in our office that agents are constantly looking for people to host open houses for them, right? And some of them they're going to put out there, and they're going to put in the Facebook group, I need someone to hold this open, right? What I don't want you guys to be doing is volunteering to take one on a Friday afternoon that's going to be held the next day, right? Because chances are no promotion's been done all week. It's a dog property that no one wants to hold open, right? What I would rather you do is seek out new listings. You can see all of our office listings on the MLS. You can set up an auto email for an area that you want to do business in. So when new properties hit the market, you get notified of them, and you can see, oh, I'm going to ask that agent if I can hold that listing open, right? Some agents don't like other people holding their listings, right? They have a small business. Some agents have more listings than they can handle. Some just don't want to do it because they don't like working weekends. So there are lots of opportunities for agents. You just kind of have to, instead of sitting around waiting for them, you have to go out and get them. You can also hold open houses for agents that aren't with our company, right? There's nothing wrong with that. So you have to do what's best for you. And I would also recommend, again, being selective of the open houses that you hold. Meaning, if you don't want to do business in Allen Park, you live in Novi, don't host an open house in Allen Park, because you're going to get people there that want to buy a house in Allen Park, that potentially opportunity to talk with sellers that are in Allen Park. So be selective of where you want, but at the same time, realize that you have to start somewhere. So don't immediately just go after, $700,000 homes because that's where you want to do. You know what I mean?
Do you get, if you're hosting an open house for someone, do you get paid? Do you get a referral fee? No?
No.
Just lead generate?
Yeah, the opportunity that you get is by meeting buyers and or sellers. And if someone walks in that wants to submit an offer for their home, great. You are representing them if they're not working with an agent. Yeah, so unlike having an agent help me out by a showing, and I would maybe pay them, if someone else hosts my open house, I'm not paying them. They're getting the opportunity, right?
Gotcha. Yep.
Now, the only time they don't get anything is if you're hosting an open house for me, right? And someone comes in and they say, yeah, I'm working with an agent, and they want to submit an offer. They're going to use that agent to write up that offer, and you're not getting anything, right? And you just have to be prepared. That's going to happen.
Yep.
Okay. So there's some really good training in our office around open houses. And there are some agents that really execute these at a high level. I will say this, at least in the near future, this is going to be a little bit of shift in business, because I suspect people will be less open arms with who comes through their home. It doesn't mean that they're going to stop. It doesn't mean that they're never going to be, do them. But everybody's trying to do these virtual showings and virtual open houses and things. And it's a way to showcase the property, online, because we can't physically go see, but nothing beats seeing houses in person. And again, it's not about the actual open house. It's about the reason to prospect. If I go into a neighborhood and I just start randomly knocking on doors saying, hey, I'm Matt, I'm a realtor, I'm not going to be as confident or as, I think compelling as if I go into a neighborhood that I have a listing and I say, or someone from my office has a listing, and I knock on a door and I say, hey, I'm Matt with Keller Williams Advantage. We just listed a property down the street, and I wanted to make sure that you knew about it. You may have seen the sign. How long have you lived here? Are you considering selling? Blah, 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 blah. So it's a springboard for conversation, rather than just that cold, I'm just a random guy off the street. that make sense? And you'll get tons of buyer leads. If you run an ad with a new listing, especially a new one or one with a significant price adjustment, you're going to get buyer leads. And then you're going to convert them via the telephone to try to, buy that house or just help you represent them to buy something else, right? It's a way to generate leads in that regard. Again, you don't have to have the listing in order to do this. This can be for an agent in our office or any other office. You may see realtors right now doing posts or ads, and it says in the, listed with permission from such and such agent. It's not their listing, but they got permission from that agent to put it out there. As a listing agent, I don't care as long as someone's, advertising my listing appropriately and professionally. I say, hey, the more exposure for my seller, the better, right? Bring me a buyer. So these are just the different steps to do in order to maximize your open house. And we'll talk more in depth about all of these things. And there's scripts for all of these for circle prospecting, for door knocking. There's scripts in the folder for all of these things. Okay. Many people find it very overwhelming to cold call. They don't want to cold call, but they don't have any problem door knocking. I don't know why, but some people are just better than that. They like that face to face. So whatever it is that you're comfortable doing or able to do, you got to go out there and do it. Because again, guys, this is just a contact sport. The more contacts you can make, whether that's over the phone or in person. So you just have to do it. All right. So let me go back to the agenda here. Questions so far? We good? All right. Hosting the open house. I'll just touch on that real quick. It's important that you keep record of all the people that come through the home, right? That's how you are also going to be able to follow up with them. Most people coming through an open house aren't going to say, yes, I love it. Where do I sign, right? They're going to say, oh, maybe I'm interested. Maybe, oh, this isn't what I'm looking for. It's not what I'm looking for. So it's important for you to have a genuine conversation with them and figure out, how long have they been looking? Where are they looking? Where do they live now? Do they have a house to sell? What's their motivations? And, are there other properties that I can show you, right? When you're hosting an open house, it's great to know what else is on the market in that area. Essentially what you're doing is interviewing for the job to potentially help them buy something else, right? So you want to keep record of them. There's a sign-in sheet, get their information, including their email. There's also some apps. I know some agents bring in an iPad and they have them sign up, register there, which is great. You can do it via command too. If you set up Rob teaches a class about this. If you set up a property site, single page property site, you can create basically, they're creating a username and password, but it goes right into command. So you can do it that way as well. But nothing replaces good old piece of paper, pen. Only thing is you want to make sure that people's handwriting is clear so you can actually follow up with them. And then I always take notes. I remember to take notes. Oh yeah, especially if it's a busy open house. That was a young couple. They had a little baby. They drove a white Grand Cherokee, blah, 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 blah. They said that they currently living with family, looking to buy ASAP, haven't spoken to a lender, no agent. Whatever it is, the notes, you want to keep track. You know what I mean? So when you're doing your follow-up that week, things come to mind for you to be able to use. Okay. Switching gears a little bit. Jumping into launch 7. Do you guys remember the exercise we did with the allocation of funds? Okay, so it's basically a budget, and with that came a dollar amount that you needed or to reach your goals. Now, if you had a spouse or someone else that was contributing, obviously that total amount would be offset by that. But let's say to reach all of your goals, there's $100,000. Your spouse or partner makes $40,000. Obviously, that means that your portion would be $60,000. The goals that you are going to are based on the dollar amount that you need to produce in terms of gross commissions. So using that example, again, this is probably a refresher, but in $60,000, let's say, as far as a gross goal, in coaching, the average sales price is $200,000 at 3%. That's a commission of $6,000 per transaction. If you need to do 60,000 and each transaction is average 6, that's 10 transactions. Remember? It's a refresher. So, all right, in order to reach my goal in that regard, I have to close 10 transactions. Well, how many do I need to get under contract, right? Well, we know that not every deal is going to close, so we use 70% as a conversion rate. Okay, so back that, all right, if I have to get 10 closed, I've got to get X under contract. All right, well, I know not everyone that I'm going to get that I meet with is going to go under contract. So how many appointments do I have to go on, right? So we work that backwards to have that appointment goal. So everybody's math is going to be different based on the dollar amount that you need to make and how those numbers equate. Can everybody figure those out on their own then, based on the math that I just did? Does that make sense? Okay. So that being said, you're going to have an appointment goal, right? That you have, like, for instance, it could be 3 appointments a month. It could be 4 appointments a month. But the point that I'm trying to make is that is your one thing. We talk about the one thing being a subject and a book. The number one thing that you should be doing is focus on how do I go on appointments, right? Because everything else will figure itself out if you are going on appointments, qualified appointments, right? Because if you're going, let's say if you're going on tons of appointments, but you're not getting any contracts signed, well, we have a conversion rate or issue there. What are you saying in your appointment, right? How are you qualifying your appointments, right? If you're making tons of contacts, but you're not setting any appointments, all right, that's a different problem to have, right? How are you asking for the appointment? How are you setting those up? So once you start tracking your numbers and understanding that it goes from attempts to contacts to appointments to contracts to closing, it's pretty simple what your one thing should be, which is setting those appointments. And then understanding, all right, how do I make the contacts to set the appointments? Because, if you reach out for 4 people and you set 4 appointments, you're pretty dang good. But the reality is that's not going to happen. You might reach out to 100 people and set 4 appointments, which means you're failing. Sometimes it feels like failing 96 times, right? And it's not always a no, it's not right now, right? But you have to be okay with that, right? And that's just sales, right? If this was easy, everyone would do it. But it's a numbers game. So if I told you 5 out of 10, 100 people are going to say yes, I just have to call more people, right? A buddy of mine in college wasn't really great looking, but he always seemed to go on dates with girls. And, it was the funniest thing because it was like, how do you do it? And he's like, if you knock on enough doors, one's bound to open. And his, mantra is basically like, I just have to talk to more people than the average guy because I'm not that great looking, but I've got a good personality. And it's funny, but it's true, right? You just have to talk to more people. And that can be in a wide variety of ways. Doesn't have to be cold calling, doesn't have to be door knocking, but it has to be something, right? So getting involved, calling your sphere, getting involved in, your church, getting involved with your kids' sports, whatever it is, you just have to make sure that you're making those contacts, right? On the flip side, lead generating, you could put out a lead, right? You could be a lead, you can be a magnet. People contact, you, right? And you interact with them. You can do that as well. I think it's important to do both. Okay. Now, this is a CGI conversation, and this is something that MAPS coaching does, and it's keeping track of your business. And I don't utilize this for agents that are just starting. I think it's, again, just important to, can you see my screen where it says the 4 conversations? Okay. So it is at any given point, your goals and your actuals, right? So at any given point in the month, we can see, are you on track? Are you not on track to hit your goals? What I mean by that is if this says listing, but maybe this just is overall appointments, right? Not just listing appointments. If your goal each and every month to reach to work that math backwards is 4, right? And we're into the first week of the month for 4 appointments, and 1 weekend you're going on 1. Awesome. You're on track to meet your goal, right? Now, if your goal is 4 and it's 2 weeks into the month and you're at 0, you are not on track to hit your goal, right? So this is just a regular check-in to say, what are you doing, and to know your numbers. Otherwise, comes to the end of the month, it's like, nope, didn't hit my numbers. And there's no accountability to it, and there's no sort of insight of what you should be doing. Now, this is a GPS. So, well, it's called a 411, or it was called a 411. Now it's a GPS. This is another goal tracking thing. And again, we're all about systems and models here. And for those of you that are like these kinds of things, this is highly useful. This breaks down to basically, here are your annual goals, right? This is your goal that you would have for commission, right? Maybe your total appointments, total contracts, whatever. And this is broken down per monthly. You can do these for personal too, right? Maybe your monthly goal is 1 date night a month with my spouse, 1 daddy-daughter date with my daughter, 1 I'm going to go to the gym 4 times a week, whatever it is. There's professional and then there's personal. But essentially, let's say it was my transactions, right? I was to 26 transactions, and I have got to close, on average 2, and I've got to go on 4 appointments a month. This breaks it down even farther and says, okay, what are my weekly goals? Well, if I've got a goal to go on 4 appointments a month, each week I've got 1 appointment to go on. All right, what am I going to do to go on that 1 appointment? I'm going to hold 1 open house per week. I'm going to circle prospect around that open house, 100 doors. I'm going to contact 20 people in my sphere or my database. I'm going to run a Facebook ad. I'm going to whatever it is. So when you come in, you sit down or you focus, you plan out your week, this is what you're going to do. This is your week, right? So that every day you're not just sitting down at your desk when it's time to start working and just winging it, because so many agents do that. If you take the time to work out a plan, right, and this isn't set in stone, you can tweak this, but it gives you self-direction and holds yourself accountable. Because I'll tell you, we are the worst bosses to ourselves, right? Typically, most people are, right? If they're not being told what to do, they don't do it. They're not hard enough on themselves. And as one of those people, I just find it a lot easier if I plan out so I can just zombie. I'm just doing what I said I was going to do, right? And I'm also holding my calendar accountable. What I mean by that is, can everybody see my calendar here? So this is my calendar, and I've got different color coded things. You'll notice that for the most part, I don't do anything until 11 o'clock in terms of calls or webinars. My afternoons are for appointments. Right now, I'm not doing many, but this time is allocated for things so that each day I just come in, I've got my stuff, I've got my time I'm doing things, and I just look at my calendar and I do it, right? This is called time blocking. I don't have every second of every day time blocked. I know some people do. I don't like to live like that, because once I start not doing it, then I throw it all out the window. So give yourself a little bit of flexibility, but make sure that you have a design to your day, to your week, because if not, you're just, again, going to be winging it, right? Does this make sense? So whether you use a digital or a paper calendar, I suggest you do that. And there's no right or wrong, but whatever you put out there, commit to. If it says you need to do whatever from 9 to 11, don't allow yourself to go and watch TV or to go do laundry or whatever. Stick to it. Okay. there's a bold law, bold is training program through KW, and has all these laws which are essentially just one-liners, quotes. One of them is, if it's not on your calendar and it doesn't exist. So, what that means is that if I live and die by my calendar, especially since I'm married, I do coaching, I've got 2 kids. If it's not on my calendar, I forget about it. It's not existent. So I have to put everything on my calendar, right? Again, otherwise it doesn't exist. So if I was to pull up your calendar and you were to tell me, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I would expect to see it on here, because again, in life, if it's not on your calendar, it doesn't exist, or it's not a priority for you if it's not on this. High level people, the ones that are regimented, that are just the most productive people you've ever seen, they've got everything: workout, eat. I mean, they've got it all. I can't live like that, so that's not me. But that also doesn't mean that I just wing it each day. Make sense? Okay. We're at 1:15. We've got, Gene, you sent me a listing package. Is that right? Or offer, rather, right? Okay. I'm going to pull this up. We're going to go over. Can you see it? Yep. You see KW Advantage. We're on the PA. Jordan, can you see it?
Yes, I can see
Okay,
it.
awesome. I wasn't hearing anyone. Sorry. All right. So I'm just going to use you as an example to kind of go through this. Okay. This is the offer. Jean's representing a buyer. She submitted this to Sharon and I, and I'm going to use this as an example. So starting off with, great, checking city, township, or village. So if this was city of Northville, I would put Oakland right here. Okay. After that comma. All right. So this is where the city or whatever goes, and this is where the county goes. This is where the address goes. This would be 511 Reed Street, comma, Northville, comma, Michigan, 48167. Okay. The full mailing address here. The legal address goes in this box. You can find that on PRD. Okay. So a property is going to have a legal address. Let me pull one up, for instance. Jeez, a pizza. Okay, so in public records, right? That was 511, what?
Reed Street.
Reed. So what I'm just doing is, if it's in Oakland County, it should show up, right? I'm gonna hit results. Okay, 511 Reed Street. That's you. That's your house.
Yeah.
Okay, so in PRD, this is where the legal description is. You see this?
Oh, okay.
So that's the legal description. So you'd copy it, and you would. It's also going to be in the listing if this was a real listing. I got this thing over here that I can't.
Matt, were we supposed to send offers to you?
Yes.
Oh,
I think you had previously done it, but yeah, as part of homework, I wanted you to represent a fake purchase, and then as well, I want you to be on the listing side, do a fake listing agreement. Okay.
I cut out of a class early and made.
No worries. I think you already did it to me first launch, so don't worry about it. If you haven't done listing though, do a listing one and send it to me.
Okay.
So this right here, Gene, or everyone, this is, don't put a name here. This is anything that would be included in the purchase that is beyond these things.
Oh.
So for instance, this would be drapery, all flat screen television, whatever it is that you might be including in the property, that's not listed above. It's important to put, to recognize the fact that there's a difference between the built-in appliances and those that aren't. Because what are built-in appliances? Justin, you've attended Pete's forums. What are things that, unless they're specifically listed here, aren't necessarily going to go with the sale?
A microwave,
What?
countertop.
If it's a countertop microwave, if it's a built-in, technically it would, but I would still list it. we just talked about this in the last one with Pete, is that if there's any uncertainty, you can never be over detailed. Does that make sense?
And also you would want to make sure that if you can take a picture of the model number, or at least list what type of appliance it is, so they don't switch it out on you.
Yeah, you could say, all appliances as seen and showing, on April 15th, whatever. But yeah, I am always very detailed in here, as well as exclusions. So if we are talking and they're like, oh no, they're not including the washer and dryer. Not only do you not put the washer and dryer here as inclusions, but you specifically list them here as exclusions. When Pete said that he's bought appliances before, I'm in the same boat. And the reason why is because we did not put something here that was agreed upon by the buyers to be excluded. And then I'm stuck. The buyer saying, well, I didn't know the washer and dryer weren't included, right? And it falls on me, right? Not on the seller, because it all goes back to what's in the listing or what's in the purchase agreement. So make sure your inclusions or exclusions are clear as day. Terms. This is where you write out $325,000, like THREE 20. You know what I mean? That's where you put that, and then here's where you put dollar amount.
Okay.
And I always also, again, I'm a little nitpicky, but I put a comma, .00. Okay.
Okay.
Other than that, you did great. Closing. Yep. I do a time frame range. Right. Yes. This is giving them a little bit extra time. I usually do 10, 3, 2, 2.
Well, I didn't know what the time frame should be.
Yeah, that's okay.
Also, when I went on to DocuSign and did this and put the initials and all that in, when I went to the preview, it printed out the date that I did it. It didn't, which was weird. So I think I'm gonna have to go back and take another DocuSign class.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have just started to scratch the surface with DocuSign. I've been a .loop user, so I'm in the same boat with you guys learning the new system.
When I tried to fix some of my mistakes on here, I couldn't figure out how to go back and do it.
It's okay. The most important thing isn't necessarily that you know how to manipulate this document, but how to put these things in, or what to put in. So if you were absolutely in a crunch that you could just print out a blank one and use a pen, that's okay, right? I just want you to be comfortable with knowing the fields, knowing what to put in.
Should we be using DocuSign to fill these out then?
Yep, exactly. DocuSign is integrated with, it has all of our legal documents. You should be going to a class sometime about that.
Yeah.
You have to have your people in command and then create an opportunity for you then to create all the documents to be able to be signed.
So does it, when you put in that you're making, doing a listing, it automatically brings up all the documents that you will need to make a listing?
Correct. Yeah, there's the listing, then there's the buyer, and then I think there's also for a lease as well.
And there is a checklist somewhere just to make sure that they are all there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We have a checklist in one of the launch folders, or not in one of them, in both sessions that, in the sessions in launch. Whoa. Also, I think it's also in buyer resources and seller resources. There is, bear with me. Required buyers documents. These are the ones that need to be signed. These are the ones that are just needed for administrative. So there's one of these in both the buyer and the seller side. Okay. Number 20 right here, that's where you'd put the title company that your buyers plan on using. You just write out, like if it's legacy title, you write legacy title. Sorry, just a second. Working from home, right? So the way that you had written this up is that there's going to be a $10,000 earnest money deposit paid via cashier's check at the time the offer is presented. What I typically do is the dollar amount doesn't matter what the dollar amount is, but I typically do, if it's easier for my clients to do a personal check, I click here and just do personal check. And then I typically select the second box, which is deposit to be collected by broker other. And then I write in upon accepted purchase agreement. Okay. What that means is basically it just allows me to collect that check from my buyer after we've gone under agreement, not when I'm presenting the offer. Cause then I have to get a check. And if we don't figure it out, we don't go under contract, I got to get the check back to them. It just makes it a little bit easier. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And if you do select that or personal check, this is the buyers have to sign here, basically acknowledging that they understand that the funds are there. It's not just, oh, I'm going to write you a check, but don't cash it for 2 weeks because I'm waiting for this or that. Make sense? Additional conditions. This might need to be a specific thing or be expanded upon through another addendum in some situations. But I'm also going to select the boxes of whatever else I'm including with this purchase agreement. So most often a seller's disclosure, lead-based paint. If I'm submitting that with this offer, I'm going to include those. I'm going to check those boxes. Okay. Make sure your buyer's initial each of those things as well as the bottom of each page. And then with that, there is, obviously they're signing, you're signing, you have your salesperson's ID and date. And with this, the other documents that are necessary, the disclosures, the acknowledgements, the lead-based paint, and the seller's disclosure that came from that listing.
So
Okay.
you don't have to fill a date in for the counter offer until there's actually a counter offer.
Yes. So when you're submitting your offer, everything's going to be signed here, nothing here yet. The sellers are going to sign here if they counter or accept. And then this is where your buyers are bottom lining it, acknowledging that they either accept their counter or they acknowledge that they've received the signed copy back. This is where the bottom line is. So it goes buyer, seller, buyer.
Okay.
Make sense?
Mhm.
And then after you have your buyer's bottom line, make sure the other agent, title company, lender, all get copies of that fully executed purchase agreement.
So as the agent, I'm going to prepare the document, all the details. I'm going to make it available to the buyer via DocuSign, and they're going to go through, and DocuSign is going to walk them through the sections, and they're going to, adopt a signature, initial it, and all that stuff in all the right places.
Correct.
So once my buyer has done their part, I'll get notified. Probably I'll print it out, submit it to the seller's agent, and then they have their discussion and sign it. They will sign it and then get it back to me?
No, not necessarily. We have the beautiful ability to do everything digital these days. So when you get this all signed electronically from your buyers, you download it as a PDF, save it on your computer, email it to the agent, and they can download it and put it in their electronic signing platform to have their clients electronically sign it. And then PDF it and then return it to you. And I'm not saying that people, especially certain buyer clientele or people that are on the run, sometimes agents themselves aren't technologically savvy and they do things old school ways. There's nothing wrong with it. You can have a combination of electronic signatures and wet signatures. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter as long as it's got the signatures on it. Really, until closing is where people need to be wet signing all the closing documents, because purchase agreement, listing agreement, addendums, inspection, all those things can all be done electronically in both ways. So, back in the day, I can't even imagine having to go every counter, every going back and forth. And there must have been a lot of, inefficiency. And now we can do it all. So answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, awesome. All right. So thank you, Gene, for making yourself vulnerable, doing that. Good job. Jordan, if you could do the same for me, submit me an offer if you haven't already. And then also on the list side, do the same thing on the list end. Fill out the listing agreement. Just like if I was hiring you to be my agent to do all the listing documents are in there. And next session, is this session 7? No, this is 6 technically, right? So we only have 2 sessions more, right? I think next week. 2 sessions more, and then we're wrapped up. These have all been recorded again, so if there's anything you want to go back and watch, they'll be in the YouTube channel. And then we'll fold you guys into general coaching, which is on Mondays and Thursdays at 11 o'clock. Any questions before we go?
No.
Okay, guys. Stay positive. Keep contacting your people. Keep practicing scripts. Keep putting people into command. Keep attending the sessions that you can to learn. And just because we're not going to talk again until Monday at 12 doesn't mean I'm not available. So let me know if you have any questions or anything like that. Rob's mediating a good webinar at 2 o'clock. I'm going to go grab a bite and come back and watch if you're available. I think it'll be good. If not, it will be recorded, so you can always watch it later. But take advantage of the time we have right now. Try to do the best you can. Let me know if you need anything.
Can I email you I was making my own detailed like buyer transaction list.
Mhm.
Can I send that to you just to critique?
For sure. I love critiquing. No problem.
I like being judged, so I guess that works out well.
I'll choose my words carefully. I'm not judging. I'm helping you.
Yep. Okay,
All right.
thanks.
You guys have a great day. I will talk to you soon, okay?
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, Matt.